Good evening and welcome to Wednesday, January 20th Special Board of Education meeting for the East China School District. We'll begin this evening with a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. If everyone would stand, please. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. So the next item on our agenda is items of interest, recognition, and inquiry. Do the Board of Education members have anything they'd like to share at this time?
Nope.
Okay, Mrs. Savula?
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. Then we'll move on to the next portion, which is recognition of persons wishing to address the board. At this time, we do not have anybody calling in, or we did not receive any letters. So we will move right into the purpose of this evening's meeting, and that is to discuss the sale of school property. Mrs. Savula, would you like to lead that for us, please?
Yes, I sure would. Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to read a brief summary of the timeline and events that have led us to tonight's meeting. So, triggered by decades-long declining enrollment, East China School District embarked on a consolidation plan along with a bond project. Our first bond didn't pass, so we went back out, and a second bond passed. But the trigger for these bonds were the need for a restructuring of our school district due to our declining enrollment. So at the completion of this consolidation plan, both Eddy and Gearing school buildings are no longer needed. They will no longer be needed because we don't have enough students to fill them. In planning for vacating the schools, the district was talking with an interested developer, the same developer that purchased our old middle school in Riverview East building. When that developer no longer had the ability or means to move forward with our discussions, I reached out to the St. Clair County Board Chairman, Jeff Bohm, to discuss ideas for other possible future developments of these properties. Now, keeping in mind that in order for East China School District to capitalize on the full potential of our consolidation plan and to stabilize our budget, those two school properties of Eddy and Gearing needed to be sold. Now, in the initial bond process, there was a facilities infrastructure needs assessment that was completed. The needs assessment for the Eddy School building identified many infrastructure needs, and the demolition costs would be about $680,000 to demolish the Eddy School building. Similar needs were identified at the Gearing Elementary School with an estimated demolition cost of about $520,000. Now, in addition to the heavy financial concerns, this property is also one parcel that had a non-existent road that needed to be vacated, along with the fact that the district needs to continue to occupy Gearing for approximately the next 3 years until the bond renovation of our other school buildings is completed. Those things had to be taken into consideration as we were having these conversations. One of the concerns with selling Gearing is any possible property tax implications. The school district just cannot afford to assume any additional financial burdens with those tax implications. Now, the purchase agreement being discussed this evening meets the needs of the school district and, most importantly, provides us with the opportunity to realize the full positive financial impact of the ECSD consolidation plan. The purchase agreement we're discussing has been supported in discussions by Mr. Dan Casey, Mr. Jeff Bohm, Mr. Gordon Van Weerden, Mr. Gary Fletcher. And I would like now to open up the floor for them to fill in any of the pieces and parts of this process that maybe I have missed or needed to elaborate on. And I'd also like to open up this time for school board members to ask questions. So With that, Mr. Bohm or Mr. Fletcher, is there some
Yeah,
piece?
I'll start off, and then actually Jeannie had asked us to talk a little bit about a land bank before
Perfect.
you guys got on the conversation. Dan, I'll let you do the land bank piece, and then Gary, you can talk about some of the other stuff. So full disclosure, Suzanne and I graduated together, and I think her name was announced like way ahead of mine at commencement, so I'm still a little Also, I found this. I got to share that with you. That is my 1973 Eddy Elementary kindergarten picture. So it tends to be a little near and dear. But yeah, Suzanne reached out to me after the other one, after the other buyer fell through. And Dan and I, along with the county and Gary, we work on a lot of different economic development projects. We identify things. One of the things through our Blue Meets Green, probably about 4 years ago, was to redevelopment of old school buildings. I think we either have 6 or 7 vacant schools right now in St. Clair County, with more to come. These schools tend to be really pretty difficult to develop. They're not an easy reconvert, right? One of the groups that or the group that we're actually looking to enter into the development agreement with has had experience in redeveloping schools. They did the old, if you ever go to Yale, Michigan, in downtown, there's a school that looks very similar to Eddy Elementary. They converted that into a 30 apartment. It's a senior housing. It's just seniors live in there. It's not senior services type of thing, but it's been super successful up there. It's put on the tax rolls, back on the tax rolls for a substantial sum of money, and these developers have the ability to do it. When you talk about this, there's really 3 stools to this. There's the Eddy piece, there's the vacant land piece, then there's the Gearing component. And what the developers have expressed an interest in is doing the senior piece with Eddy. Also developing the vacant land. What we're really looking at is trying to get into that first-time home buyer market. I'm a firm believer that we got to start attracting some young families with kids. I mean, what are we talking about today? Declining enrollment, the reason that you don't need the schools anymore. So really make a conscientious effort to go after that particular market, which the developers are willing to do. No real set plans on Gearing yet. That's 3 years down the road kind of stuff. We'll need to have those conversations on that at a later date. When we talked about this, how do we do this? How do we bring some assistance to the table to make these developments a reality? Essentially, a lot of these schools are old. Going to require a lot of monies to be put in, and there's some state incentives that can be made available. Well, the city of St. Clair is not available for a lot of these incentives because it's not a core community. Core communities tend to be poor communities, but this land bank tool, which I'm going to defer to Dan, why we're proposing to have the county land bank actually purchase this and hold this, and then work with the developer. So Dan, I'm going to pass it over to you and talk a little bit about land bank.
Yeah, so first of all, we saw a real opportunity with this property that goes beyond the repurposing of the 2 school buildings. In particular, we were looking at the availability of the 20 acres of land for new development. And in our case, our interest is to develop starter homes or single family homes that would help to generate new residents, higher population in the county, of course, and more kids in school. The reality today is that it's very difficult financially for developers and builders to construct starter homes in the market. By the time they're done with the land cost and then putting in the infrastructure, the lot prices go up to $50,000 to $60,000 or more before the builders have even started the construction on the home. So that raises the starting price of the home anywhere from $225,000 up to $300,000, and that's obviously not a starter home price. So one of our goals when we looked at this property is there a way that we can utilize existing incentives that are either state or local to enable us to put some starter homes on the land in between the two schools. And that's where a unique solution was brought to the table for consideration, which is the use of a land bank authority. The county has a land bank, which has some resources, some money available, but more importantly, they have a tool that is called tax increment financing, which is the ability for a developer to invest money into a project and get a portion of that investment repaid through future taxes generated from the property. The Land Bank Authority has the ability to do that, to create a TIF plan using some of the state's brownfield redevelopment tools. So essentially, without getting into a lot of details, what's being proposed here is that to incentivize the development of single-family homes and in particular starter homes on that land, we would engage the Land Bank Authority with the developer through a development agreement mechanism that would allow the developer to get repaid for the cost of putting infrastructure, roads and water and sewer onto that property. By doing so, it reduces the land price, which enables them to make these homes potentially available as starter homes.
The one thing I just want to add quick to that too, we even met with the St. Clair Community Foundation, and they have a strong interest in some first-time buyer assistance programs, like $5,000-$10,000 down kind of stuff to help get these younger families move up here and to get them in. Anybody got questions, I guess, on land banks or anything else? And then I'm going to turn the legal part of this thing over to the two attorneys and let them talk about that. But that's the reason you're going to see an agreement from the St. Clair County Land Bank is basically to be able to incentivize these redevelopments. Because like I said, schools are not easy to redevelop, to the point I've got 6 or 7 sitting of them right now that are blighted. One of the other things that's actually pretty interesting is, and I know you just got the email, Suzanne, because it just came through, Jeff Donaldson, who's the head of our metropolitan planning. We have Michigan State University, their planning department over there. They do graduate level studies, and every year to 18 months, they look for different projects to do. They did the Birchwood Mall, the redevelopment of that, what some of the potential uses could look like. Very in-depth. I know I gave Suzanne some copies and maybe she can get them to you later. It's very well put together. Michigan State University is going to actually use these 2 schools to look at some different ideas for redevelopment. Hopefully something that we can use as a playbook to try to go to some of these other communities and, take some of these eyesores and turn them into something.
I'd also like to mention that the land bank offered us, the school district, the ability to be relieved from that tax implication for the Gearing School that we need to occupy. So Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Van Weeren, when you're talking about that I would really like to make sure that the board understands and our community understands how important that is.
Yeah, I can kind of chime in on that. This is Gary, and I've been working with Gordon, which has been excellent, very good to work with, and we've ironed out all the wrinkles. But the mechanics of how this works is the land bank becomes the buyer, and why that's important is property that's held by the land bank is tax exempt. So if you had a private developer who was going to buy this property to give you the money you need to get out of it, but still have it leased back to the school district for gearing, any private property owner is going to say, well, if you're going to get that building to use for 3 years for nothing, you're going to have to cover all my expenses because I'm not going to pay you to occupy the building, which means you'd have to pay property taxes. But because the property is going to be held by the land bank, there are no property taxes. It's exempt. Gordon asked me to get a verification of that, so we got the city assessor to give us a letter that confirms that that will be off the tax rolls until that property comes out of ownership by the land bank. So the mechanics of how it'll work is the land bank will enter into an agreement with the district to buy the property for the price that was agreed upon or has been agreed upon. That property will, and then the developer at the same time before the closing will enter into an agreement to develop the property as Jeff has discussed. And as Dan mentioned on the residential part, and what the developer will do is reimburse the land bank for its expenses. So that'd be the purchase price plus some out-of-pocket expenses. And that will enable the land bank to pay the district, but the property will be held in the land bank, so it's tax-free, no property taxes to the district. And then as the property is going to be developed, so it'll start with Eddy, it comes out of that and goes on the tax rolls. Because it'll be owned by the developer and he'll be developing it. The same as to the vacant land, as Dan mentioned. And then the district will hang on to Gearing until you're done in a triple net lease, meaning all of the expenses of ownership, maintenance, that kind of stuff, except no property taxes because there are none. So basically it gets the district the money it wants. You avoid all the demolition expenses. You have no property tax expenses. And as Dan pointed out, and Jeff, it brings to bear state incentives and methods to make this development happen, because without those incentives, no developer would step into buildings built in the 20s or whenever they were built and try to redevelop them. So it really, it's good that you talked to Jeff, and he's knowledgeable in this stuff and brought the right things to the table. And from my opinion, it's the land bank has nothing to gain out of this. The developer obviously does if it all works. The district does because it gets out from under the building, gets its money, and stays there lease without paying any property tax expenses. But the real good part of it is what you're going to end up with is property that goes to private ownership, goes on the tax rolls, so it will produce some tax revenue. And the other thing is we'll bring residents into St. Clair, so hopefully some additional student count for the district.
Gary, thank you. Excellent summary, and I've really enjoyed working with you and how timely you've responded to everything. With regards to the purchase agreement, I wanted to mention one thing and thank the county for working on the one parcel issue. I would indicate to the board that the county and the land bank are doing that without any cost to the school district. So we can, in fact, parcel off the property into Eddy and to the vacant land and to Gearing. So with regards to the purchase agreement, it's a very straightforward transaction. Basically, the land bank has 90 days to do its due diligence. The parties will close within 120 days. Like Gary mentioned, there will be a triple net lease. We're very careful to deal with the tax issue. I think that's absolutely critical to deal with, and we've done that. The rest of the provisions in the purchase agreement are what we generally see in a buy and sell agreement. I would indicate to the board that because the school is selling the property, there will be no transfer tax at closing. So in terms of the closing costs, we're basically looking at paying for a title policy. The parties have agreed to split the cost of the survey, but otherwise the transaction is very straightforward. We've disclosed there is asbestos in the two buildings, and that Eddy is in a state of disrepair, which I think everyone can take notice of that. So, in terms of moving forward, I think that the comments that have been made about old school buildings are very applicable here. Our law firm represents 504 school districts around the state of Michigan, and my office is full of other transactions involving old school buildings. So I think it's exciting to move forward with this transaction, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions at this time?
I have a couple.
Okay.
First, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work. I know you've been doing this for months and months. Second, I'm not a lawyer, so I didn't understand a couple of things in the agreement. So on number 3, the lease back, you've said that there'll be no cost. Is there any place in here that I missed that it says that there'll be no cost to the district?
But to clarify, the district will pay all of the costs of operating gearing during the time the district occupies it, except for, we made it very clear there will be no taxes imposed on the school district. And there's also a provision later in the agreement, which is a contingency that in paragraph 8A,
Mhm.
that the lease agreement is subject to review and approval by the Board of Education and the buyers. So this is the initial step. We will draft a lease at a later date and have it reviewed and approved.
But the cost to the district, other than our operating costs, there'll be no cost to the land bank.
That's correct. The school district will continue to operate gearing and pay for utilities, insurance, maintenance, that type of thing, like as if the school continued to, have ownership of that building.
Okay. Next one. On 8A. Is it 8A? 8G. Is that the way of saying that you won't sell to charter schools?
Just so we're clear, under Michigan law, we cannot put any provision in a purchase agreement or a deed that would prevent property from being used for an education purpose. So, Gary, maybe you can expound on that language, because that is the intent of the land bank, but we cannot put something like that in an agreement or a deed restricting future use.
Yeah, as Gordon pointed out, the district can't do that. But the land bank, for different motives, not to stop other educational opportunities, can do it. And those motives are, if this property isn't in the hands of a private user or and not a tax exempt user, then what can happen is there's no ability to recover the investment that went in it for utilities and infrastructure and demolition. And therefore, what the land bank is going to require of the developer is that it either stays in private hands, so they pay taxes, and not occupied by a nonprofit, so they pay taxes, and limited the uses that you could have by a nonprofit to the city, the county, the community foundation, and I think there was one other one in there. But so that isn't the purpose that the land bank's doing it, but the result is going to be you're not going to have a charter school there.
Okay, very good. And okay, number 5. It says the buyer shall restore the property to the condition as it was before any inspection by the buyer. Is that supposed to be seller?
No, that in terms of the buyer doing due diligence, inspections, any type of testing of the property, that the
Okay.
buyer will be responsible if the transaction doesn't close.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wondered if that was a typo or if that really meant that they would have to do it. So, okay, good. And then I just wondered why on 7 they switched from buyer to purchaser. I know it's silly, but I just kind of wondered. Because they defined it up top.
Excellent question and catch. We'll make that correction before Monday.
I mean, it's just silly, but he defined it
Yeah.
at the top. So that's all
Thank
I have, but I'm not a lawyer, so I had to ask.
Any other questions from the board?
Just a couple quick ones. So I understand, along with paying the operating costs for gearing as we move forward while we're using it, the only other really expense to us, it sounds like, is closing cost survey, those kinds of things. And that sounded like in the presentation those are pretty minimal costs. Am I correct? Or
That
closing
is
costs and those things.
Yeah,
And they
they're,
were shared.
They're standard closing costs. Generally, the title company will charge the parties $400 or $500 for the closing. But again, since there's no transfer tax, the school saves about $1,200. So really, we're talking about the title work and splitting the cost of the survey.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, trying to visualize that vacant land area, how many lots are proposed for that development?
Truthfully, we don't have a proposal on it. The nice
Okay.
part about it being in the land bank is it's going to be work. The cities ultimately will have to come before the city for some of the rezoning. I mean, let's face it, if you've got to build starter homes, you're going to have to change those lot sizes. You're going to have to get them down. But there was no overlays or any of that type of stuff completed yet.
All that work still has to be done.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for me.
Any other questions from the board? Amy? Okay, I think the board is all set.
Yeah. You did a fine job. Thank you.
Did you want to add anything else?
Gordon, can I just ask if you could explain the last sentence of paragraph 4 where the word not? I'd asked you this previously, but I just think it might be a good idea for others to hear your explanation.
Good question, Suzanne. And the language basically says that in the event between now and closing, there's damage to either the buildings or the property, and the district determines not to repair the damage, then the buyer's not obligated to buy the property.
Okay, thank you.
Right, there's just a little 2 in there that's missing. I don't have any questions. I reviewed the purchase agreement. I think it looks great. I want to commend everybody for all their hard work on this and for really thinking outside the box and helping the district put this together, and obviously helping the city of St. Clair and our community. And again, thank you to Mr. Bowe, Mr. Casey, Mr. Van Weerden, and Mr. Fletcher. We just sincerely appreciate it. And I think it's exciting, and we look forward to getting the ball rolling, I believe.
Yeah, I think this is truthfully, this is one of those situations which I think is a win-win-win for everybody.
Mhm.
It's a good redevelopment, reuse, good for the schools, a partnership type of arrangement. And, it's exciting to see, and hopefully it can kind of become a footprint for what we can do on some of these other school buildings we have out there.
Oh, absolutely. And, like you said, you have 6 of these properties in St. Clair County, and I'm sure there's hundreds sprinkled throughout the country. So I think it's exciting that we're able to actually do something positive with these buildings.
Thank you.
So I guess if there's no other questions, then
Jeannie, I got one question. You guys are going to put this on your agenda for Monday night for final action?
Yes, it's an action item on our Monday's agenda. It's our board policy to have a discussion at one meeting and then have time for the board to, do any more due diligence that they'd like to ask additional questions, and then we vote on it at our next meeting. So that's why we thought time was of the essence, and we'd like to get this done this week so it can go on Monday's agenda and we can vote on it then.
Do you need any of us on that meeting at all, or are you?
Well, we do have a couple of board members missing this evening, so they will be reviewing the tapes. Copy of
Let
this.
us know if you need us. Let us know.
We will. So I'll reach out to them tomorrow, have them watch the meeting, and then I will definitely reach out and let you know if we have additional questions.
Okay.
But thank you for making yourself available. I appreciate it.
It's personal. We named it back in 4th grade. It was Eddie Rascals, Eddie Eagles, or Eddie Devils. Picked Eagles.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, everyone. Have a good evening. And at this time, we'll adjourn this evening's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.